Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours. I'm your host, Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of Done Dissertation, where we demystify the dissertation process so that you, the doctoral student, can write and defend your dissertation in 1 year or less. This episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours is sponsored by the Done Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. It's a 4-month dissertation coaching experience designed to help you write and defend either your dissertation proposal or final defense in the next 4 months. To learn more about our program, visit www.velocitydissertation.com. And as you all know, at Done Dissertation Office Hours, we are all about giving you all as doctoral students the inside scoop of what life is like after. And we always want you to have access to folks and researchers who have leveraged their doctorate in various ways. And so today's special guest has done this very well, and I would love for you all to hear more about her journey. And so we have a special guest, Dr. Keena Mosley. She's currently the CEO of the Momentum Leadership Group and author of Reigniting Your Impact, Actionable Strategies for Overcoming Leadership Setbacks and Defeat. So let's give our guest, Dr. Keena, a very warm welcome as she comes on to talk about her journey. Dr. Keena, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Ramon. It's a pleasure. As you said, I am the CEO and Chief Transformation Officer at Momentum Leadership Group, and we're a coaching and consulting firm that provides early education, nonprofit, and social service organizations with leadership development solutions to engage their teams, to maximize results, and empower their mid-level leaders for sustainable success in reaching their organizational goals.
I love it. I love it. So, you have your things going on with your business and, earning your doctorates, but things don't always start there. So I always like to say, let's go back in time and, when you were thinking about schooling and education, was the doctorate something that you had in mind for your own self?
So honestly, no. I actually, as many people probably do, I went to school a very long time ago for my bachelor's degree, and I thought this was going to be it. And honestly, even before the bachelor's degree, several years ago, I believe it was Sasha Obama took what they call a gap year now, and everybody was so excited, and everybody started talking about gap year and the kids at Harvard and the kids here, and they all take this gap year, and it's great for development. Well, I took a gap year before a gap year was a thing. And my family thought it was the end of the world because for us, everybody in our family just went from high school right into college. And I was that child that always did what everybody thought or told them to do. And so when they realized that my applications weren't getting responded to, when there was no talk of college, they started pushing me and asking some questions. And I finally had to come clean and say, well, I didn't apply anywhere. And so needless to say, that became the talk of the family. And I grew up in the South. So when you grow up in the South, everybody's in your business. And I took a gap year, and in retrospect, I'm glad that I did. I went through community college. I took the long route. I'd had 10 years between my bachelor's and my master's, another 10 years between my master's and my doctorate. And I never thought I was going to go back to school. And honestly, the reason that I got my doctorate was two things. One, I had a mentor who was my director at the time tell me that I needed to go back to school. She said, listen, Keena, there are things that you want to do that are going to require you to have this doctorate degree. And this doctorate degree for you, and this might not be for anybody else, but for me, and this is what she said to me, was not about learning new things. It was about getting those letters behind my name and validating my experiences and my knowledge. And so she said to me, this degree, these 3 little letters are going to open up doors for you that nothing else will. And so I began to really think about that. And then I talked to my nephew, and I was telling him, I was thinking about it, and he asked me why, and I explained it to him. And then he was saying, well, what's the highest degree that you can get? And why do you always have so much money? He was about 10 years old at that time. He was
Yeah.
enamored with the idea that his aunt could do all of these things for him.
Right.
And I said, look, when you go to school and you handle yourself well in your profession, then you can make a lot of money. You can be really successful. And he's like, okay, so what's the highest degree you can get? And I said, well, typically it's a doctorate degree. And he said, oh, well, then I want one of those. And in that moment, I realized there was no one else in our family,
Mm.
no one else in our immediate circle that had ever attained that level of education. And I said, okay, I need to do this, not just to open up doors for myself, but to open up doors for him.
No, I love that. There's a couple of things you said that like resonated. The fact that you had a boss who was saw a vision for you that you might not saw for yourself. This idea like you need to get this doctorate because there's like a lot of doors that you don't realize that are closed right now without having it. And I tell our clients that all the time. You know, with our coaching program, a lot of times folks like balk at the price. They're like, "Oh my God, it's expensive." But I'm like, "Look, y'all about to get this doctorate. You have an infinite return on this investment if you do this thing the right way." And you've alluded to that there's a lot of opportunity and money to be made with the doctorate.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of money to be made. There's a lot of opportunity, but you can't access those things. Even once you get the doctorate degree, you can't access those things if you become one of those people. And this is something I had to grow through. If you choose not to use the doctor, if you just say, oh, just call me Keena, oh, it's not that important. Well, it is that important. First of all, if you paid all this money, all this blood, sweat, and tears to get it, you need to have people recognize it and
Yeah.
acknowledge it. It's not about being cocky. It's not about being arrogant. It's not about forgetting where you came from. It's not about making people feel bad or intimidated, all of those things that we go through.
Yeah.
It's about opening the door. The DR period is a key, and
That
we
is
have to be okay with using the key.
that's I gotta write that one down. It really is, and the people just don't catch it until it's too late, or they just get stuck. And so I'm glad that you alluded to that. So talk a bit about like where did you go to do your doctorate, and what was that process like when you first transitioned into your doctoral program? How did you make the having had 10 years between master's and doctorate? What was it like
Mhm.
going back to school and like getting back into that mode again?
So I'm a lifelong learner. So the idea of reading and getting information and all of that, that wasn't that challenging for me. What was challenging for me was I went to Nova Southeastern University, Fort Lauderdale. And the program that I was in, because I lived in Los Angeles, California at the time, it was an online program, primarily online. And so there was a big chunk of the program where you had, at the start, you had to go to a week long session that was absolutely grueling and painful. But I think that program whipped me into shape and really made me realize, listen, this is serious business and you're going to have to buckle down. And I just had to move some things out of the way and had to send some signals to folks and say,
Yeah.
listen, I'm going back to school. This is important. I need to focus. And I'm not going to be able to say yes to all the things that I was able to say yes to before. And I need to do some things differently. Now, let me just say, admittedly, it
Yeah.
took me 7 years to finish my doctorate degree.
Okay.
Couple reasons. Everything that could happen to me, I feel like did happen to me just about. My grandfather, who was everything to me, passed.
Hmm.
He passed in my first semester.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
I literally was online with my group, working out the details for a group project while I was waiting to be picked up to go to his funeral.
Mm.
Like it was that real. So my grandfather died. I met a guy that eventually proposed and became my husband. All of this happened in the first couple of months. We got married and later, but I met
Yeah.
him right away. And I was like, look, dude, I'm in school. I don't really have time for this. Let's see what happens. I just want to go get a couple of meals. That's it.
Yeah.
Um, but here we are many years later, and it was great. Let me see. I changed jobs a couple of times.
Yeah.
Every time was a promotion. But then I also developed anxiety attacks, which
Mm.
I'd never had that problem before. I thought I was great at managing stress, and it became too much. And so my pastor's wife actually said to me, listen, you cannot do everything, and you're going to have to figure some of these things out. And so one of those things I had to figure out was I couldn't take a full load, because at the time I was taking 9 units, working full time and working part time. I had 2 jobs and I
Lord
was
have
in school.
mercy. You had a lot going on. I mean,
I
I
had
did
a
too.
lot
I
going
get it.
on,
I get it. But
and I
geez.
was volunteering in my church on a regular basis.
Okay.
So, like, I was teaching Bible study almost every week. So, it was just too much, and so I cut one of the things I did was I cut back the number of hours that I was taking at a time.
Yeah.
And then eventually, and this is for somebody that's worried about the price tag that's associated with getting your degree, I started taking one class at a time so that I wouldn't have to pay a loan. I just would pay for the class every semester.
Mm.
Um, and but at the end of the degree, at end of the day, you know what matters? I had a done dissertation.
Finished. That's a fact. Yeah, and you finished what a lot of people don't do. And so, how did you, because you had a lot going on, how did you manage that? And before you answer that, one thing I can relate to is like being busy at the start of the program. I got married, let's say we got married on September the 10th, 2011. My doc program, I had a presentation due on the 12th on that Monday. I couldn't go on a
Oh,
honeymoon or anything. My first semester as a doc student was at the same time. 2 days later was my like second class as a doc student. Terrible
wow.
timing, but we do what we have to do. But how did you manage to like keep life going outside of just taking less classes? Like, how did you cut people out or back, with all the other things that you were doing? Because you spoke to some of that, and I think our
Yeah,
audience.
honestly, I just told them. I said, "Listen, I got homework.
Mm,
I need to read. I need to do whatever it is I need to do. I need to focus on that because the truth of the matter is, we all know these prices go up every year. Sometimes it seems like every semester.
yeah.
I don't want to keep spending all this money on this program. I want to be finished with it. And I have some goals. Everybody in my circle, though, knows that I've always been very goal focused.
Hmm.
And so it's not strange for me to say, listen, I need to buckle down and focus on these things. And if you can't support what I'm doing or where I'm going or what I need right now, then maybe I don't need to be a part of
Mm,
your life right now, or you don't need to be a
yeah,
part of my circle.
yeah,
Everybody in my circle has to support me or I'm done.
yeah. And
And
that was
that's
a
not to say support me in like a self-serving way, but
yeah.
if you're a part of my circle, if you're a part of my community, my village, then what we do is we support each other in a reciprocal kind of way. And if you can't celebrate what I'm doing and champion what I'm doing, then I have to question our relationship.
You bring up that's a great point. And a lot of folks, I find that when they get stuck and they start blaming, family, work life balance, those types of things like impact them. They're not willing to have that tough conversation with people and say, "Look, I got to cut you out just for now." And I think that's the thing,
Mhm.
people aren't always thinking about is like this process is not forever. Like folks come in our program and they're like, "Oh, this is gonna be forever." I'm like, "Y'all, if you're at the proposal phase, I'm gonna have you done in 4 months with the proposal. If you're past that, you're out of your program in 4 months if you follow the process." And people, I guess,
Mhm.
sometimes aren't willing to make that short-term sacrifice for the long-term
Right.
gain.
And honestly, um, part of my selection in the school was looking at how it was going to impact my life. Now, I know everybody doesn't always have the luxury of really sitting down and figuring out where I'm going to go to school,
Sure.
for different reasons. But I sat down and I looked at about 3 or 4 different programs. And a couple of them were local, where I could have just gotten in my car after work and drove over to campus. And I did want to do an in person program. But at the end of the day, what I realized was the cost, the intangible cost
Mm,
of those programs was more than I could bear.
sure.
At the time, one program met every Wednesday night and every weekend. Well, I wasn't willing to give up every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, a full day
Yes, sure.
plus every Wednesday, which was Bible study night. So I'm not gonna get my extra dose of Jesus, and you're gonna take my Sundays away from me, and then I'm not gonna have my Saturday. It was too much for me. So I made that decision going in that that program wasn't for me. So I think the start of the decision making is where are you going to go to school and how does this program fit? And then you can have those tough conversations. But first you have to decide right.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And so, you get into your program, you get things going. Talk a bit about your dissertation. Like, how'd you come to studying what you study? Tell us a bit about that journey, because there's a journey from you starting that program to getting to this point where you're actually going to be an independent researcher doing your own project.
So as I said, I'm always goal focused, and I'm thinking, what's the end goal? Well, for me, the end goal was to become a consultant and to um, be a professor at a college. So I said, okay, what is everybody talking about? What is going to get people to pay more attention? And so for me, being in the early childhood education space, really what was the big deal at the time was there was this huge nationwide push for teachers to have bachelor's degrees. And so for those of you that don't know, K-12, they have bachelor's and master's degree and beyond, right? But the early childhood, the preschool, the infant toddler teachers, they had not historically, traditionally been required to have those higher education degrees. Some just needed units, some positions you needed nothing, some positions you needed an associate's degree. And so now there was this big push to get bachelor's degrees, and it was all because it's going to help kids have better outcomes. And so that's what I did my dissertation on. I wanted to prove or dispel this idea that teachers with higher education levels automatically resulted in higher outcomes for preschool students. And so I was able to not only support that, but I was also able to find out that really the real difference seems to be in the ongoing professional development. Ding, 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 ding.
Consulting. There you go.
There you go. So there was a path because I was trying to figure out, how do I help me get to my end goal? And so that helped me with my end goal. And then what I did was I just pulled on a former employer to get child data from them. And then I was working at the county office of education. So I had relationships with programs throughout Los Angeles County, which is a very, very large area. And so I just pulled on a couple of those programs and, went through the IRB process with them, and everything turned out great. And what I
No,
ended up doing was I said, hey, if you allow me to come in and do this, not only will I come and make the formal presentation with your staff, I will do a professional development session.
yeah, Dr. Keena is laying out the game. So if y'all not catching it, use your research to inform your consulting. And then it was smart to say, hey, not only will I give you all, tell you what I found, but I'm going to do PD for your organization. Now that gives you the chance to test whatever it is that you're going to do as a consultant to see, does that model actually work if I put it into practice? Now you essentially had a beta of your whole, different workshops or different types of packages you want to do for other clients. That was genius.
And it gives you reviews and a client base to start with.
Yep. Some testimonials that, like, yeah, Dr. King
Yep.
has laid out the game. If y'all want to do consulting, or even if you don't, this is a way to go. Sometimes it just happens into it when you do good research and you find something, a unique position. Now you can fill that void, and you found a very unique void to fill with that.
And what they would tell us at Nova was, they would always say the best dissertation is a done dissertation. You don't need to try to save the world. And though I totally agree with that, I didn't want to just do a dissertation for the sake of being checking a box, really, right? Because that's how I felt like they were trying to sell it. I wanted to do it based on something that I was excited about and I was passionate about, and that was going to serve me well long term. And so I did not try to solve the problems of the world or save the world, but I did try to lay out a path for myself. And at the end of the day, isn't that what this whole process is about?
Yeah, no, it's true. And so you were able to do that. And throughout the dissertation process, how was the actual process for you? Were you able to get through, navigate it pretty quickly? Did you take a while, since you said, you took a while taking classes? Did the dissertation take you a while as well? Like, what was that part like, just trying to get
The
through?
dissertation did not take me that long. I had the blessing and the curse. So one of the other things that happened to me during that time was I ended up having a major surgery and being off from work for 8 weeks. And so I took that time, and I must have done all of the lit review, probably was done during that time. And
Gotcha.
I was moving faster than my team was. I was on to the next thing. I was always ready. And so the dissertation process in and of itself did not take me that long. I got all the coursework out of the way first, and then I
Yep.
did the dissertation.
No, I love how you approached it. I call that what you did. We call it in my book, 14 Secrets to a Done Dissertation. I call it the conceptualize, write, submit method. So basically, you and your chair conceptualize a chapter, you go write. And then once say chapter one is done, you send it to them, you're off to chapter two. You're not waiting for feedback on one. It doesn't matter when they get that to you. You're going to keep
Mhm.
moving it so far ahead that it speeds up your process and
Yes.
you implemented it to a T the way you
And you know
described
what
it.
else? I probably conceptualized before I started with the chair,
Sure.
honestly, because I knew from the start what I wanted to do my dissertation on.
Yeah.
So what I did was, as I progressed through my coursework as much as possible, I was always focused on what was going to be a part of the dissertation, or how is this going to help me with my dissertation. So I was kind of building it along the way.
That's the way I tell all students, if you can, going into your program, or even if you don't know right away, like within by the second semester, if you kind of have an idea, start doing all papers related to some aspect. Say it's a policy class, it's going to be related to my topic based on the policy in that area. If it's a methods class, I'm gonna do some methods or something related to my topic. Like, just make it and be very strategic. So by the time you get to your dissertation, you actually know the literature and you don't have to spend a lot of time rereading stuff because you're already well versed by that point.
And you have chunks of your dissertation already completed.
Yeah. Yeah, you giving this the game. This is the thing. It's the process, and people don't follow it, and then get stuck. So I'm glad that you've like reiterated a lot of things that we often say at Done Dissertation, because it's just important that folks implement these type of strategies to get through. Um, and so with that, you do your dissertation, you finish up, but you notice this gap in the PD space with early childhood programs. And so is that where the momentum leadership comes from, based out of that work from your dissertation, or like how did that evolve, that aspect of the work that you do?
So, Momentum Leadership Group is actually in evolution. I've always been passionate about leadership. However, when I started my consulting, I started working with the folks that were in the classroom. So I was doing PD for teachers, which is exactly what I did for the dissertation process, which is exactly what I was doing at my job at the time. I loved it. It was great. But as I began to evolve, I really wanted to focus more on what was happening or not happening with leadership, is particularly in early childhood. And so um, I was in a leadership position. I saw the void that was there. So there's another gap. And so I just began to build on that and get the degree and get the expertise and build the relationships.
Hmm.
Everything that I was doing along the way brought me to this point. It brought me to Momentum Leadership Group. And so I was slowly building that. And I always had it in the back of my mind. Now, I got my dissertation in 2016.
Okay.
I started in 2009, finished in 2016. By the time that I became full-time consultant, I had my degree or my doctorate for 3 years. But when you look at the whole time span, I had been working on this for 10 years.
Yeah.
I had been working on how is it that I'm going to get to the end goal for 10 years. So everything I did professionally supported what I was ultimately trying to get accomplished. And so it was all working in tandem.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Like, you plan for the future. Like, look, I know where I'm going to do this consulting. I'm going to work with these organizations, but I need particular skill sets. I'm going to use these jobs to acquire the skill set. Then I can go on my own and do my own thing.
Absolutely. My pastor said to me one day, because I was frustrated and I was
Mhm.
talking to him about work, and he said, "Listen, whatever you do, don't leave empty handed." Meaning, anytime you leave a job, anytime you leave an interaction, anytime you leave an opportunity, you need to have gotten something out of it, something that you can take with you on your journey. But you got to know what the journey is. And that journey will evolve over time. And so, what I tell people is, I didn't fall out of love with early education. I fell out of love with working in the classroom. I evolved to the next level. And so, I'm just taking everybody with me. I grew up a little bit. I started out as an afternoon aide in a preschool program, working like 3 hours a day. And here I am, even in that work, that was before I had any college under my belt. And when the director would leave for the summer, you know who she would leave in charge? Me. I was interim director with no degree. Like, it was always a part of my path and my journey. And I've taken all of that to build this wonderful career and ultimately move into this space that I've wanted to be in for so very long. But I knew where I was going. But if you don't know where you're going, any destination will do. And
That's a
so,
fact. Yeah. And a lot
yeah,
of
and
folks,
so I just built on that.
yeah, no, that makes sense. And so for the business side, like who's your ideal client? Who do you like to work with? Because we might have people who are in that space that, who's the type of organization or client that you typically work with in your group?
So I like to work with early education programs like Head Starts that have multiple locations. I work with social service organizations and nonprofits. So those organizations that typically are focused on serving clients, right? But they are so client focused that they forget about the leadership. But they realize the leadership needs attention, but they don't always do what's necessary to kind of break that cycle. And so I want to work with those grassroots organizations, those grassroots folks who want to excel, who want to go harder, that want to go further, that are really committed to, increase performance and teamwork and enhancing mindset, and they want to build leadership capacity. Those are the folks that I'm focused on.
No, that's great to hear that that's the type of person you want to focus on. So talk a bit about, as your business started to pick up, how did you go about, because we have a lot of people who want to get into the consulting side. How did you pick up clients? Because you're really going business to business versus like a business to customer per se, like a person. So how did you go about securing clients? Like what's that journey like for someone like you?
So again, everything was a part of the process. I worked for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. Because I work with them, I had access to as many as 30 programs at one time, 30 large programs that were having $1 million budgets, multi-million dollar budgets, actually. And so I developed relationships. I'm a relational leader. And so it was easy for me to develop relationships with those folks. And so my job was to work with the leaders. I didn't go in and work with teachers. I worked with the leaders. And so I established those relationships where those folks that were in those entry level leadership positions have now since promoted into upper management and administrative and executive director roles. And so now those folks that I helped when they were having hard times or when they
Mhm.
started out or they were just trying to figure out who they are as a leader, they're decision makers now.
Yeah.
So I'm
PTE.
just calling my contacts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it goes. The relationships do really matter, and if you, like you say, you were very strategic. Not everybody's strategic, or by the time they need to have the strategy, they probably needed to have it 2 years ago versus right now.
Hmm.
So I'm glad
Hmm.
that you have mentioned, that in that way. And so you
The
built it,
other thing that I do too is I I don't mind doing some of the free things.
Mm,
So, particularly in early childhood, and I don't know how it is in other spaces, we have a lot of like national and state conferences for, a National Association for the Education of Young Children and other organizations. And they have all of these great, phenomenal folks that they have doing all of these sessions. But those people do not get checks. But what it is free advertisement. And so I will submit the proposal, I will go and I will do the presentation for free because it will connect me to folks that I may never meet any other way. And then what I do is I hang out in the hallway and I make sure that I see my contacts, right? Because what happens, you see your contacts, they want to hug, they want to chat, they want to catch up. Now, other people are looking around going, okay, what's going on with her? Let me pay attention. Maybe I should go to her session. Oh, what's your name again? Which
yep.
one are you doing? Oh, yeah, come on in. All of that works. And let me tell you, I did that right after the pandemic. I have gotten 3 multi 4 and 5 figure contracts with organizations that I wouldn't have met any other way.
That's the
And
game right there.
traveling.
Yeah, and people don't
Yeah.
recognize it. I always say, people sometimes get on like doing things for free. I'm like, depending on the opportunity, you put yourself out there, you have a client, you have a base. But I always, for me, I'm like, cool, I'll do free, but I have a number of ways to convert on the back end. Like people get so concerned all the time on the front end of what they're going to get for doing something. But I'm like, I don't care about that. I need the context. Because now if I market my free presentation, if I have 100 people in the room, I might convert 4 or 5, but that 4 or 5 is going to be worth me, $50 to $100,000. Like I'm cool. I'll do it for free all the time. And people don't
Absolutely.
recognize
It's
that
the long
opportunity.
game. You got
Yeah.
to think about the long game.
No, that's great. And I think for folks who are considering the consulting part, Dr. Keena has really laid out the roadmap of how you can do this thing. And then with that, where does this book come into play now? Is this all built off of the work that you had been doing, or like talk a bit about, reigniting your impact and how did that book develop? I'm assuming from the business, but tell me about kind of how this came about.
So, how this came about was I talked about this wonderful career, right? But in 2016, my career hit a slump that I never saw coming. And I was diagnosed as depressed. Um, I thought it was the end. I questioned everything about my career at this point. It was so bad. But during that time, I began to journal because that helped me to decompress and just get out everything that was happening to me at the time. I lost my mojo. The person that others would come to, the person that leaders in higher positions would rely on or lean on or consult with, she was literally somewhere in a hole, just a dark tunnel. And I began to journal. And as I journaled, what I didn't realize at the time was I was developing this model for reigniting your impact, which is the name of the book. It allowed me to see how I could reclaim my influence. And so out of that 2 year or a year and a half period of pain comes this book. And I hit that wall, I hit this low point, I began to see how it is that I can reclaim my influence. I reclaim my influence. Things are going very, very well for me professionally. Things are at a high point. But now I hit this low, but now I'm higher than I've ever been. And then the bottom falls out because I am a part of a grant funded program and we had to recompete for our grant and we didn't get the grant. And so that grant funded about 95% of our operations. So everybody gets laid off, including me, which I honestly thought getting laid off was the end of the road for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to recover. I can be a little dramatic sometimes. So I had envisioned myself like in the unemployment office and,
Oh, it's like an episode of Martin.
homeless.
He's in the line, he's in line.
I was having a rent party on good times. It was so
Got you.
bad. And out of all of that comes this book that is really designed to help leaders reclaim their influence and build the momentum necessary to perform at optimal levels. And so the book is entitled Reigniting Your Impact, but the subtitle is Actionable Strategies for Overcoming Leadership Setback and Defeat. And so whether it's something that's going on that is just a temporary thing or something that feels like it has blown up your world like my layoff did, either way, the strategies that are in this book help you to see your path forward. And so, that looks like a lot of different things, but we're talking about first thing you got to do is you got to get to the bottom of your problem. You have to
Mm.
really, really identify what's at the root of the problem. And what we do a lot of times is we respond to the symptoms and we put a band-aid on things, but until we get down to the bottom of it, you are going to continue to go through this spiral. And so then we move into problem solving and accountability. And the book gives you some reflection points, it gives you action steps, and it causes you to stop and do the thing that we don't often do, and that's evaluate where we are and what kind of progress we've made so that we can continue to build the momentum. When we think of momentum, we often think of this big force, but momentum is really just a series of moments. And so that is what I call your attention to, is the series of moments and how you can capitalize on that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective and just way of thinking about it. So I'm excited to see and check out your book. Not everybody decides to write a book too. So what kind of gave you to say, all right, I'm actually going to sit down and actually write this book? So a lot of people say they're going to do it, and the book doesn't happen, or they don't know what to do with it. I'm just curious as to what your
I
thoughts are on
didn't
it.
start out writing a book. I started out journaling.
Yeah.
And in my consulting experience, journey, conversations, all of that, people talk about writing books, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't know if I want to do that. And then I realized, well, maybe a book wouldn't be a bad thing, because, they tell you about establishing credibility and reach. And, your client base may not be able to afford all of your services, but you can start with a book. And I was like, oh, maybe. And then I just, honestly, it had to be a God thing, because one day I just said, I'm going to write a book. And I picked up that journal.
Hmm.
And I realized that this has the makings for a pretty good book.
That's
And
perfect.
the rest is history.
Perfect. So, folks, definitely go check out and grab the book. We'll have a link available to you all. But as we wrap up, what word of advice would you give for the doc student, who wants to kind of follow the journey like a Dr. Keena, where knowing that you want to do consulting, but know I got to get through the dissertation process. Like, what advice would you have for that person while they're in their doc program?
I have a plan. Have a plan of action. Know where you want to go, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because it's not going to be, all wonderful. It's not going to be the Instagram life. It's not. This stuff is hard work. But the more that you can build while you're in your dissertation doctoral journey, while you're still working your 9 to 5, while you're still, doing things for free, build all that you can. The more that you build during that time, the more successful you'll be when you decide, and if you decide, that it's time to fly on my own, because those things matter. And you get testimonials, and you get reviews, and you get long-standing relationships based off of what you did in the foundational phase. And if you can build your foundation before you launch, you'll have a much better go of things than if you just start from scratch.
That's perfect. We couldn't said it any better than that. And so as we conclude this episode, where can people find you online? Where do you want people to kind of keep up with what you got going on?
You can find me everywhere at Dr. Keena, whether it's the internet, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. You can find me as Dr. Keena, DRKEENA. No dot, no period, no space, none of that good stuff. Just Dr. Keena. I make it easy for you, and you can find out more about Momentum Leadership Group, as well as the book, Reigniting Your Impact.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Keena. I'm going to bring you behind the scenes for a second while I finish up this episode. But thank you so much for being on this episode. And make sure people, y'all do follow Dr. Keena.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours. I hope you all got a lot of insight, and particularly about how do you leverage your dissertation to turn it into the consulting practice. That is something a lot of folks is not taught in our doc programs, but Dr. Keena literally gave the roadmap. So if you all have been thinking about doing that, like literally go back and rewind this and really just follow the roadmap of how your research and the implications, if you will, from your research chapter, from your implications section of your discussion chapter really can turn into its own business by itself. And so you all have the opportunity to do that. Make sure that you all do keep up with Dr. Keena. You can grab a copy of her book, Reigniting Your Impact, Actionable Strategies for Overcoming Leadership Setbacks and Defeat on her website at www.drkeena.com. And for my doctoral students, this episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours is sponsored by the Done Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. The goal of this 4-month coaching experience is to help you either write your dissertation proposal or your final dissertation and be ready to defend it in the next 4 months. So if you're tired of being stuck and you want to get your dissertation done to go to do all the other things you want to do as doctor, what I want you to do is visit www.velocitydissertation.com to learn more about the program and apply. And until next time I see you all on Office Hours, have a great week. Take care, everybody.